Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. We're going to have your All-Star show where, candidly, Brian, I didn't even really watch much of the All-Star game.
Yeah, me either.
I'm going to give a little credit to the internet about solving one of my issues with the All-Star game and problems with the All-Star game, which is anytime something cool happened, there was a Vine or Vine equivalent, right? Because Vine is gone. There was a tweet with the video on it almost immediately. So I didn't need to watch a stupid spectacle live. I was able to just say, internet, you crowdsource it. You tell me what I should care about. And they did. And there was some cool stuff in the All-Star game. But I think if I'd had to endure like hours and hours and hours of watching boring stuff, I would have felt infuriated.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Dre. We're definitely in sync here as, show people. Because I felt the exact same way. I did not watch very much of it. And I knew that those highlights would be there. So... yeah, the NBA All-Star Game, not the best.
All right, well, I'm trying to think if you have any subjects. I have a fair amount of stuff to talk, Brian. It looks like you didn't add too much to the script, I think, because you were saying it's All-Star Game. You're just going down, despite the fact that essentially you did get to watch the Warriors. I would argue this is kind of rough. Two interesting facts, Brian. Team Giannis pretty much lost because Steph Curry played like garbage. And Team LeBron won because Kevin Durant did. And interesting, I was looking up this stat, Brian. Kevin Durant, and I felt embarrassed because I tweeted out, and then of course it was mainstream enough that some other just main publications like Elias and whatever were tweeting it out too. So I was like, I'm not ripping you guys off. I was just curious too, like you. But essentially, he joins the midst of people that have multiple All-Star All-Star NBA MVPs, too many acronyms there, Brian, and then multiple finals MVPs. And then it turns out, by the way, every player, I just discovered this, every player that has earned multiple All-Star and NBA finals MVPs has earned at least one MVP. The only two with one at this point are Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant. But I think, let's see, Magic, Michael, a couple others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head are also in that multi-category. So Kevin Durant is pretty good. I'll definitely give him that.
The way I look at it, though, Dre, Stephen Curry was involved in both the two biggest highlights of the game by far, and those are the only highlights I watched. So as far as I'm concerned, Curry won the All-Star game, and everyone else lost.
So what's the second? Oh, let's and why don't we do this? We've got some comments from last week on Lost, but I'll say let's do kind of like an amuse-bouche. We'll talk a little bit about the All-Star game.
Okay.
We'll talk the tons of comments. Thank you for the homework on the on President's Day weekend, Boxscore Geeks commenters. I did release a post on Thursday or Friday, I think it was Friday of last week, Brian, about Anthony Davis. It was interesting because I had this post in me that we might still talk, and I might still write it, where I was basically going to go off on Michael Jordan for being an asshole. I'm going to write it. It's mostly written in my head, so that's why it still might happen, or it might just be a rant on this podcast. And then what ended up happening was Anthony Davis left at halftime during the last game before the All-Star break. He left at halftime, and he was walking out with his agent, who, what's the name? It's Rick, and is associated with LeBron James.
Yeah, Rich Paul. And not only is Rich Paul also LeBron's agent, they're like really, really good friends beyond it. And basically the two of them kind of started this agency together. So, yeah, so it's more than just LeBron's agent. It's one of his best friends and, co-owners of this agency.
But so Anthony Davis was leaving with Rich Paul, and I was like, I ended up writing about the draft, and I have so many thoughts on the draft. It might be the whole show, Brian. So we'll talk that. But then, of course, I wrote that comment, and then a bunch of amazing Boxscore Geek commenters, Jay Gunter Brett, wrote a ton of research, and I was just it's like it's a holiday.
That was awesome. Awesome.
But so we'll talk that, and then we'll talk a few big subjects, namely AD and Kevin Durant, both leaving their franchises, and how some of that's being reported on and talked about, and then maybe Michael Jordan. All-Star Game. So you said the two big highlights. So this is what's interesting. The NBA dunk competition, the slam dunk competition, I have lots of thoughts on this, but I will say the winning dunk, and help me with the name. I'm going to get this wrong.
Oh, the winner of the dunk contest, Hamidou Diallo?
It was an amazing dunk. So if you haven't seen this, again, it's easy enough to check out on YouTube or wherever. Jumped over Shaquille O'Neal, dunked the ball, and I forget they've said the term, but I keep forgetting it. Where you you hold your arm in by the crook of the arm after you dunk. So it's like a
yeah, and I know this term too because I was looking up all the dunks that Vince Carter did it first and other people did it. I forgot too, but it's a very like monosyllabic basic word.
And I think it is fine. Like if you want a rule that if you do that, you win the dunk contest, I'm fine with. Like that dunk definitely deserved it. Also, John Henson had an amazingly horrible dunk where he dressed up in like aviator goggles with Tuskegee Airmen around, and it was supposed to honor North Carolina, the home of the Wright brothers. And he broke a prop plane doing a dunk. That was one of my favorite dunks. So those two dunks were amazing. And one of my key points about the dunk contest is first the idea of athletes improving and just over time things getting better. Because what I did after that, after watching that dunk, which legitimately deserved to win the slam dunk contest, I went and looked up Vince Carter's, it's called the It's Over dunk. And it's a good dunk. It's a very good dunk. It doesn't hold up. And part of the reason it doesn't hold up is because everybody in the modern NBA dunk contest got to see Vince Carter's dunk and say, how could I improve on that? How could I make it better? There are also weirdnesses, right? The NBA dunk contest has an interesting problem / maybe it should work this way where you're allowed to dunk multiple times. One of my favorite examples is Chris Birdman Anderson, one of the best Nugget role players. There is a fantastic dunk contest where
it's a low point, Dre.
I think it was with J.R. Smith, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when he was on the Hornets or whatever it was called, the Charlotte 50 billion names. I hate you, Charlotte, so much for basketball. But anyway, he tried like 10 billion times to do a dunk because you're allowed to. There aren't any rules that say only X tries. So because you're allowed to try over and over again, you can think of a way to improve a dunk. So dunks have just gotten better. So one of the weird tangents I was seeing about the dunk contest, people going like, the best dunks were between Michael Jordan and the human highlight reel, Dominique Wilkins back in the day. It's like, no, I'm sorry, it's gotten better. Things have improved. That's how things work. Your boy Steve Kerr of the Golden State Warriors, Brian. I can't find this. This is driving me nuts. So if anybody out there in the comments wants to help me out, he had a great interview. Steve Kerr, being Steve Kerr, responded sarcastically to someone asking about, the Bulls, his 90s Bulls beating the modern day Warriors. And he was just like, yeah, just as soon as you hit a certain level, you never improve, you never get better. Athletes in the 90s, boom, it was over. We stopped improving after that. And of course it was sarcastic and amazing. And I love Steve Kerr. He also has one of my favorite moments after one of the finals. He actually has a game winner in one of the NBA finals because Michael Jordan passed the ball to him. And he was talking about it. And he was like, well, Phil Jackson came up and had a play for Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan said, I don't know if I can do it. And I said, well, I'm going to have to bail out Michael Jordan. Of course, he's being sarcastic, but he's great. I love Steve Kerr. So anyway, that point of the dunk contest. But the other point, Brian, and I made a video back in the day, I forget if it's still live or exists anywhere, where I talked about how the dunk contest is really obsolete. And the reason it's obsolete is because the dunk contest came about in an era where there wasn't national coverage of sports. There wasn't Sports Center top 10. And more importantly, we've even surpassed that. There's YouTube, right? As I was noting, I had a real-time feed of people going, oh my God, this amazing thing just happened. Here's the video. Because in my opinion, there was a dunk in the All-Star game between Steph Curry and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I have a theory on this too, by the way. But there was a dunk where it was a bounce pass. I think it was it over Kevin Durant?
Yeah, actually, I've queued up a video of this already, so let's watch it right now.
Why don't you do the play-by-play, because I can't see your screen, but you tell me. So Steph Curry's got on a breakaway.
Yeah, it is over Kevin Durant. Yeah, it's a really impressive play.
It's over 7-foot Kevin Durant. The ball is 30 feet in the air, of course, when this happens.
Yeah, it goes way over the top of the backboard and kind of crosses over the corner, almost crosses over the backboard, and then, Giannis catches it.
30 feet in the air and slams it down. In my opinion, Brian, is that dunk was more impressive than the Shaq dunk. And I think the Shaq dunk was amazingly impressive and deserved to win. So that's the funny point I have in the slam dunk contest is I think the slam dunk contest is obsolete because the slam dunk contest existed in an era to say, there's this guy, Julius Erving, who can do amazing things. You don't get to see him do amazing things, so we're going to stop everything. Everybody's watching. We're going to show you him doing amazing things. And by the way, him shooting from the free throw line, and he did step on the line for the record if you watch the video. That is
so did Brent Barry.
That is not as impressive as other things sense. But the reason it existed at the time was to say, no one knows about this athlete. Let's show it off. This was in the ABA, the crumbling ABA. That the reason they did the dunk contest too is they ran out of teams. They did not have enough teams to do a proper all-star game. So what they actually did is they did the Denver Nuggets, because they had the best record, against the rest of the ABA. Yeah. And they came up with other gimmicks, essentially like the dunk contest, to fill it. And so that has existed since. But I've argued forever that it's obsolete. And the reason it's obsolete is that really, if you've got real-time video of these amazing athletes playing, they can do things that are more impressive than when you basically say, okay, just a ball and just a prop, a prop playing, another player do a dunk, versus, hey, by the way, you're going to have a 7-foot Kevin Durant. You're going to be running. You have two other guys dunk. And then, by the way, my theory on Steph Curry, by the way, Brian, is I saw someone say it was an incredibly impressive pass. I would argue he just saw Giannis and Joel Embiid, who are both 7-footers who can jump, and was like, if I get the ball anywhere near there, one of them's going to dunk it. That's what happened.
Yeah, because he telegraphed the setup, right? He ran to that spot, and he's like, all right, I'm going to bounce it now, guys. And then the second play, of course, I have to refer to, is him doing the alley-oop to himself to reverse it, to end the game, even though they were behind. Everyone loved that dunk as well. But the dunk contest is really interesting. So I agree with most of what you said. I think... for me, it's hit and miss, and it's not just a straight evolution to being better. And what most people have said is that the Aaron Gordon, Zach LaVine one, which was not that long ago, last year or maybe 2 years ago, that was the best of all time. And I agree with that. Like, to me, I've watched most of them. Those were just the best dunks and the best competition. And this one just wasn't as good. So... yeah, we'll see. And then we've had some other good ones too, right? People say Vince Carter maybe is the best, dunk contest player of all time. And that's true. Maybe we'll see. That's just subjective, right? I don't even think that the scoring there's rules for how you do the scoring, right? Like if you talk about Olympics, things with judging like figure skating, it's very technical how the judges are supposed to do it. There's all these criteria, and there's still controversies. But I don't think the NBA cares. They just kind of do whatever. So, yeah, I don't really know how you can say who's better than the others, other than just what people think. And you can't really measure the slam dunk contest very well.
Well, I get someone actually asked me about this in Twitter. Let's see if I can get the name. It might not, because there's a lot of interaction, because one of our next subjects got a lot of interaction. So apologies, person. I'll try and include you on the show notes if I remember to do the show notes this week. But there's a fantastic book by David Epstein called The Sports Gene, Inside the Science of Extraordinary Athletic Performance. And he talks a lot about genetic advantages, and in some cases genetic and environmental advantages put together, like the place in the world you grow up in, that make you ideal at sport. And one of the things he's been against is actually what I've just been saying about athletes getting better, because I think for the dunk contest, my point is the reason there has been massive improvement has a lot to do with the fact that every time there is a slam dunk contest that is recorded for posterity, put into an archive for everybody to see, and it is now universal knowledge. So you now have athletes that can stand on the shoulders of giants and take that information. And it's one reason we argue the NBA is the roughest league, where the X's and O's, the Bill Belichick's, can't win because the best players catch up too quickly. In the NBA, it is the top players that do well. One of the examples I love, forget who told me this, so apologies, but it was on Twitter, but was if you looked at Magic Johnson right before Magic Johnson retired, like he was, and I think you told me this, Brian, it was a spot up three. Magic Johnson was learning to shoot threes. So basically, the idea of, okay, well, there's this strategy, right? There's Morey ball. We can win in the NBA with Morey ball. The best athletes look at the game film and are like, okay, I'm one of the top athletes. I can pick this up faster or just as fast as everybody else, and I still maintain my edge. And that's been the NBA forever, right? It's a star-driven league. And the top players, even when a new strategy comes along that seems revolutionary, what ends up happening is you get Kevin Durant doing that strategy.
Yeah.
What are you supposed? It's like, yeah, you might have been able to Morey ball the league, and then now you have Kevin Durant shooting threes, whereas, back in the 80s, back with Adrian Dantley, he would have been shooting post up too. So it's like, The best players keep up with this. And Dave Epstein in the Sports Gene, he talks about this because one of the issues he's had is this idea that athletes have gotten much, much better, because there is this idea. It came up in a Stephen Jay Gould book where he talks about like the peak limit of athleticism. And so there's this wall of, how good a human could ever be. And as the population gets closer to it, the competition level in a sport just, gets more fair. We're nowhere close to that in basketball. We do not have enough talented people above 6 feet or as amazing as Muggsy Bogues, who 5'3". I was looking him up this week. Muggsy Bogues is just ridiculous. We don't have enough people with the genetics to play basketball at an elite level to be fair, ever. And we're going to get into that later in the show. But there are other areas where that catches up. And so to your dunk contest point, I think some of it is sometimes the dunk contest, it just comes down to happenstance. It comes down to the right two players were doing really good on the good day, or they chose two impressive-looking dunks. And the reason I brought up Dave Epstein is he's talked about races where sometimes the improvements in races above like top athletes is the quality of the turf they use that they're running on, the quality of their shoes they're using. There was this brief period of time in swimming where there was a new swimsuit that everybody was using. And all of
that was Michael Phelps' heyday, right?
During the of course, Michael Phelps would have still been the best in the world, but world records were falling. And of course, world records are in milliseconds. So it's going, sometimes the advancement isn't as much athleticism. And I'm even saying at the NBA, right? I've made this argument forever. Dr. J could probably, if he trained, exist in the modern NBA and do great. The real issue with improvement is we have years and years and years. The minute it reminds me a lot of stand-up comedy, right? The minute Vince Carter does an amazing dunk, he can't do that joke again without the audience going, I've heard that before, and people build on it.
Yeah, and that's why it's weird, because it does kind of bounce around, right? Like we had if we had Vince Carter, in the early 2000s, then kind of in the mid 2000s, Jason Richardson, had some really good ones, and then it was kind of dead until, that infamous Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon we were talking about. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. And the other thing I think about the slam dunk contest is that even though, like you're saying, the athletes are getting better and better, I don't think they put a lot into the slam dunk contest in terms of practice. Like there's a super long form Vince Carter article about that slam dunk contest where they just interview him and go into everything surrounding it. And he kind of has an idea about what he's going to do, but he basically said that he still freelanced a little bit. So yeah, it just kind of seems like they're just going out there and doing whatever. Despite that. So anyway, the dunk contest is interesting, and it is purely aesthetic. I just don't see how we can really measure it at all.
All right. I want to get into this is just Dre has a chip on his shoulder show, Brian. So let's get into a few of our topics. I want to do a Fuck That Guy segment, possibly one of many on this show, actually, Brian. It is to Brian Ohringer, and this guy is potentially is a former NBA employee with the Washington Wizards. And I'm going to read a bunch of stuff up. And if you go to my timeline, Brian, people have responded, because what he did is he made this tweet, which I'll read to you. He deleted it after saying he doesn't delete tweets, and then made an apology where he basically lied about what he said. So he said, I appreciate the sentiment, as many are delusional and don't appreciate how good they are. But I will say this. This is amazing, Brian. So I am cutting in. First off, he's wrong, but I want to give an award of some sort, like a Darwin Award, a Dunning-Kruger Award, some award for how he phrases this next sentence. I am precursoring.
Dunning-Kruger Award. I like the sound of that.
I didn't even play college ball. Played pickup often with the Wizard staff. And I could 100% hold my own playing with rotation WNBA players. The speed, physicality is a big difference. He is saying, I could hold my own against WNBA players, the top players in the world, because I was able to play pickup, which is not even serious. That's not even competitive, right? Pickup basketball with, and he doesn't say Wizards backup staff. He doesn't say like even trainers, though I think he does explain it was trainers later. I could play against professional basketball players because I was able to play against the staff of the Wizard in non-competitive games. And rest assured, that's what he's saying. He is saying, I could 100% hold my own playing with rotation WNBA players. He is saying, I am at a level of mid-tier WNBA players. That is absolutely ridiculous.
This makes a lot more sense now, because I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter today about WNBA players, and so this is the origin of it. It's this guy with his bad take. Well, so the best response I heard from it is, why is it that all the best NBA players respect the WNBA game and their players, but 5'11", 185-pound guys on the internet don't? So
that is a perfect drop in place, Brian. I'm going to see if I can find the person properly to give credit. So first off, I want to give a thank you to LeBron James. He is freaking amazing. And so what ended up happening was, let me see if I can get her name correctly. Okay, so I apologize if I mess up your name, because you are amazing and you're a better athlete than I'll ever be. But it's Shaquille Hill notched a quadruple double in college level hoops. And what's amazing, and so I'll put it in the script, Brian, so you can, because there is a LeBron James.
Wait, so is that where it came from? She got this quadruple double, and this random guy is like, "That's not shit." Is that pretty much what happened?
Okay, so by the way, it's next to quadruple double, Brian, in the script now, if you want it, because the very top thing, it's pinned. LeBron James is talking about this. This was in 2018, so I didn't even realize this. What happened is someone said that these are unrelated, by the way, Brian. One of the sports bureaus just said, David Robinson notched the last quadruple double this many years ago, and she did an Andy Murray. Andy Murray has done this in tennis before. Whenever someone's like, "Can you believe Federer is the last player to do this?" He'll usually go, "Men's player," right? Serena Williams or someone else has done. And so she's notched, I believe, 2 or 4 quadruple doubles in college. And there's actually video of LeBron James talking about it. And LeBron James, to this point you just said about how come idiots, this is pure Dunning-Kruger, like people that don't play basketball professionally, how come they can think this way, whereas professional athletes are amazing? LeBron James is talking about this quadruple double and says all that. He's like, getting a quadruple any level is freaking amazing. And then in the middle of this, I wouldn't play the audio, but in the middle, he actually lists her halftime stats. He's like, she got this quadruple double, but did you see she was like at 2, 3, 4, 4 at the half, so she went off in the second half. The best players in the world are impressed by athletes in the WNBA, in NCAA that are women players. You have these delusional, this is why Dunning-Kruger is perfect, people saying it. And then let me see if I want to read his response, because it's a long one. And what pissed me off, and I actually said, sometimes when the internet gets angry at a person, I'm not the biggest fan of jumping in and yelling at them. In this case, I was okay because of how he handled it. Namely, he took the tweet down and then put up if he takes the tweet down and said, "My tweet was in poor taste, I apologize for it, I've removed it," that's fine. And I've been in that boat too. You quote something wrong, you quote something offensive, right, that you didn't think about at the time, and you just say, "Look, I was wrong, and I'm taking it down because I don't want it to live." If you take down a paragraph tweet where you say something stupid, and then he released a screen cap of many, many things where he is saying, so like in the middle, he was basically saying, I never said I could hold my own against WNBA players. I'm just saying some high school player could do well and blah, 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 blah. And he goes on, and that's on his, I'll say I'm not even going to link him, but you can look up Brian Oringer. I was really upset by that, going, that is not what you said, and this apology is bullshit. And I'm really sick of this, especially, I guess he's not an NBA employee at the moment, but he did work for the Wizards till 2017 and with the Hawks. Hawks are an interesting franchise, Brian. They had some people we don't like, apparently, but none of them work for the Hawks anymore. And Dave Barry has brought this up a bunch. I am annoyed at the animosity entities that are partnered at least tentatively with the WNBA. The NBA is partnered with the WNBA. ESPN has deals with WNBA. This weird animosity, and it really just comes from a lot of idiotic males who overvalue their own ability, and it frustrates me. So I was willing to basically chime in on that because I'm not a fan.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll point out that's funny to me, Dre, you linked me her Twitter account, and like you said, I think her first name is Shakila. Well, So she's at Shakyla _, but then, the other name is Big Daddy Kai. I love that. It's almost like Becky Lynch the man, that's a great Twitter handle for her as well.
Helped her brand that. Like, that was her idea, and then he was like, you got to hashtag this, and he was a fan, and Mick Foley has been huge behind like women's wrestling, and he's a huge Becky Lynch fan, so that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm glad you put this story on the script, Ray. This is awesome.
Yep. All right. He's an idiot. Fuck you, Brian Oringer. And then Dave Barry had the capper, which is, this guy isn't a professional baller. This guy was a scout for the Wizards, and the Wizards are not a good basketball team. So he's not even good, at least at a holistic level. The teams he has been with are not even good at the thing that is his job. So maybe get good at that before you try and tell other people how to do their work. Another chip on my shoulder this week, Brian. So Chyna got into the Hall of Fame. For those of you that don't know, Joni Lawler, a.k.a. Chyna, was a female wrestler that wrestled against men in the Attitude Era of the WWE. She's one of the biggest names ever. And then she had, her off-the-court issues put many, many pro athletes to shame. And it is a shame because kind of reading the room, it looked like she had a lot of substance abuse issues. And there were many cases where you could tell that there were people that wanted to give her money, because anybody will take advantage, right? Anybody will try and make money off of you if there's any money to be
I think
made.
It's worth pointing out, Dre, she passed away, young, like in her late 40s, and she had, drugs in her house when she died, right? And I think it was
overdose, yes.
Yeah.
So she was an amazing wrestler that wrestled with men in the Attitude Era, had a lot of off-the-court issues that unfortunately resulted in her death. And it became very apparent watching that she did have lots of off-the-court issues because she was a no-show. I would be interested in like various convention circuits where I'd be like, I might be able to see Mick Foley or CM Punk or whoever. And, she would be on the docket and she would be a late call-out, or, she would show up on like TNA and then never went anywhere. And you're like, why did she disappear? TNA is a rival wrestling league to the WWE. One of these shows we'll talk AEW, Brian, but not this week. There's too much. But anyway, she passed away, and many have argued she belongs in the WWE Hall of Fame. Now, it's worth noting, the last couple of weeks, you've heard us bash the Naismith Hall of Fame, Cooperstown. We hate Hall of Fames. The WWE Hall of Fame is the most egregious and bullshit, and really, Joni Lawler should have been in the WWE Hall of Fame a long time ago, and there have been various people that say it. Now, an argument I've heard is, a legit argument I heard was, when she was alive, she had enough off-the-court baggage that you might be worried about having her show up. And that I give credit to. Now, in an interview, Triple H, Paul Levesque, who is like a high up at this point, CFO, he's married to Vince McMahon, who owns the WWE.
Yeah, he's part of the family.
He's married to Vince McMahon's daughter. He's a high up exec at the company. He's one of the biggest wrestler names, but of course
he runs the booking for NXT, right, which is one of the biggest brands as well.
Exactly. NXT is like the minor league wrestling, but it's really just like a developmental.
A lot of fans like it more.
It's interesting because it's a developmental league, but it's not developmental in the normal sense like AAA. It's developmental in saying people that are going to go to the WWE come through here, and that can mean top wrestlers from around the world who are just like, okay, I just need to learn the WWE camera angles, learn their rings. So to your point, the reason some people might like it better is it would be like if we had if the G League was essentially preseason NBA and we got to see, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. If those, or more accurately, it'd be like if Luka Doncic and, Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo and Ben Simmons, they all came through there because they just had to learn the rules and it was just a tune-up. That would be kind of what it's like. So he's a high up at this point, and he gave an interview a few years back. One of the things Joni Lawler did do on.
Oh, we got Dre locked up here. Let's see if he comes back. It looks like let's see. Have we got you back, Dre?
Oh, what was the last thing I said?
We got you back. We're just talking about Triple H. Paul Levesque you were gonna say something about him.
He gave an interview where he said he didn't want Joni Lawler in the Hall of Fame, essentially because she did adult films, and he didn't like the idea of anybody Googling her. And
wait, didn't he have a romantic relationship with her?
He was involved with her
before Stephanie, right?
Before Stephanie, it's believed that he cheated on her with Stephanie McMahon.
So then, how can he?
In-ring stuff for the record, there is an in-ring storyline with Triple H, Paul Levesque, where he humps a corpse. The WWE itself has so many issues. There are so many people, Hulk Hogan, right? Despite the fact that he was briefly blacklisted from the WWE for racist comments he said, they've welcomed him back. The WWE is not a place to stand on. This person was involved in adult films. I don't want them back, including like one of the people Chyna was involved in an adult film with was a WWE co-star, Sean Waltman, X-Pac.
Right.
And he has since been welcomed back to WWE. So it's a bullshit argument. I could give the argument, well, while she was alive, she had too much off the court stuff that we couldn't trust that she would show up to the Hall of Fame gala and behave appropriately. But since she has passed, she has belonged in the Hall of Fame and she has not been welcomed in. She has recently been inducted, sort of. So she's on this year's card. It is with a team DX, which I don't know your thoughts, Brian. I was going to ask you about this and maybe move on to non-wrestling, but I almost feel this is a slap in the face, in part because, one, it's a team, not her individually, and it was a team, for those that don't know, that included Triple H, who, as I mentioned, is a high up at the WWE. So if it was a team she was part of that she was getting let in, that might be acceptable. But the fact that it's a team that has the guy in WWE right now on it as well, it almost feels more like they're still not giving her due. So you might argue it's better than nothing. She's belonged in since her death. Many have argued that. I kind of feel weird on this, Brian, where I feel it's kind of a slap in the face.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm just still shocked about this this Triple H angle you're talking about, and I don't mean a wrestling angle. I mean a real media angle. Like, is he really saying, well, she was good. She's good enough to have sex with me, but if she had sex with someone else on film, she can't go into the Hall of Fame? That's ridiculously chauvinist.
As itself, some of the biggest names. Edge had one of the most popular segments was, of course, I don't remember how they did it, but it was an on-screen sex angle. Like that was, there was a live sex show. That was what it was called. That was what the angle was called. With Lita, there have been so many people with so many worse off-the-court issue things where as soon as she passed, it's like there was no excuse. And it's up there with Ben Wallace. It's like, this was a huge name. This person was one of the most popular people for you, doing transcendent things in an era, especially now with women's wrestling being where it's at. Many are arguing in the WWE it's better than the men's wrestling product right now. And like Becky, as you were just saying, Becky Lynch being the man, many are arguing Becky Lynch is the biggest name and most popular person. So it's kind of like it was bizarre. So it's kind of a good news, bad news. But like I said, on my annoying tangent, that was my around the NBA stuff. Do we want to talk comments, or do you have anything else to chime in on either of those?
No, I'm ready for comments.
All right, so I'm going to give an apology because you guys gave some long comments. Let's give you guys some behind-the-curtain stuff about the Boxscore Geek show or the site. One of the things I've wanted on the site, and I've asked Patrick about this, is having a comment length limit and a refresh limit. I love you guys, but sometimes some of you write full-on posts, which I love, but it's also like a lot of homework for me. But so there was a lot, and I haven't read as in depth. Basically, I made an argument about the draft. I said, with Anthony Davis, there's a very obvious problem, which is the top players in the NBA are unhappy with franchises. And then it's hard to be mad at them for this because the way the NBA draft works is if you're a bad team, you get top crack at the best crop of incoming players. And it's unsurprising that a player like Anthony Davis, who is one of the best in the world, right? Let's take a look. Let's go to the player comparison engine. So let's go to the tools engine. So if we go over to the tools engine, Anthony Davis, Brian, I'll say I think there might potentially be some inflation with the numbers. Like I said, we're doing a data audit at this moment, so we'll give you some behind-the-scenes stuff on that, about the wins produced formula. But at this point, it is – I didn't do career. So one thing you can do on the player comparison engine, Brian, as you know, you can do career. So I'm looking at Anthony Davis on the player comparison engine for career. He has already racked up 78 wins produced. If he lasts 2 more seasons, he'll get to 100, which is a very rare distinction. He's one of the best players in the NBA ever, one of the best athletes ever. And he's been on a horrible franchise. I think he's been to the playoffs, 2 or 3 times? Is it more than that?
Sorry, I was muted there. I want to say 2. times, yeah.
Okay, so you're
and they definitely lost to the Warriors in the first round, and I want to say maybe twice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can see him being frustrated, and you are right, it is 2 times. I can see him being frustrated and annoyed, and he did come out and basically say, I want to go to the Lakers, and we made the note that we agree in principle with this idea of what the Pelicans did in saying, you're more valuable playing out the remainder of your contract than going to another team. But we've now seen with 3 players, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and Anthony Davis, all 3 of them just going, I hate it here so much. I am going to make such a stink that you have no choice but to trade me. Now, we're at an interesting point where the Pelicans didn't blink, and now it's the trade deadline, and there's some speculating that Anthony Davis is like, I'm not – it's a weird twofer, right? Anthony Davis might say, I'm done playing for you. And the Pelicans might be going, if you play for us and get injured, we can't trade you. So both sides might be agreeing. And then, of course, we don't agree with this stupid logic, but, of course, you've said – some teams like the Clippers and the Pelicans, right, they're 13th out west. They are a decent amount out, right? They're, I think, 5 or 6 games out of the playoffs at this point. They might be thinking they want to tank. Now, we don't agree with the tanking strategy. We've discussed that ad nauseum the last couple of weeks. But their logic might be, we'd rather just tank and rebuild and make sure Anthony Davis is healthy enough for a trade. But, they really mess things up here by not trading him before the trade deadline, if that's their argument. Like that's the funny thing. To us, we're like, a year of Anthony Davis trumps anything you can get back in return. But if he's done playing for him, they might get nothing or a lower deal. Or if I was Anthony Davis at this point, I might just go like, I gave you an out. I told you I wanted to go to the Lakers. I told you before the trade deadline. I wanted you to let me go to the Lakers. You didn't. I'm not going to agree to an extension with any effing team other than the Lakers. And by the way, you're leaving Lonzo Ball out of the trade. Otherwise, I'm sitting out all of next season. I couldn't have a fault with Anthony Davis for doing that, candidly. And the only unfortunate thing I mentioned is I'm suspecting, especially listening to some of the words Adam Silver has said in interviews about like how we could prevent this. Instead of saying, let's get rid of the draft, saying, how can we prevent this? I'm worried the next CBA is going to have some harsh punitive stuff where like if a player sits without notice or whatever, that, the team is liable for twice their salary for that game and the player's on the hook for the full salary or something like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of where, again, the reporting is headed. And this is one of those kind of announcement things we like to talk about that we don't put a lot of credence into. But yeah, that's where it's going. The owners aren't happy with the amount of control that the players have now, and this is a great example of that. Apparently, Michelle Roberts did too good of a job getting, power and money back to the players. And of course, the players themselves, Chris Paul, LeBron James, and the other leaders do a great job. So this could be heading to a lockout.
Yeah, and we're pretty sure it's heading to a lockout. I'm just worried about that. But what ticks me off, this is called like the anchoring effect. We talk a lot about behavioral psychology and mental foibles on this podcast. The way the anchoring effect works is human brains aren't really good at doing the stupid trope of like Spock logic or Sheldon Cooper logic, and Sheldon Cooper logic's way out. But the idea of this person that's just ultra genius and thinks super logical, Sherlock would be a better example. We are really bad at that. So one thing we do is we look for relative things to compare to. The reason it's called an anchoring effect is, let's say you go to a store and decide you want to pick up a bottle of wine. You don't know how much you want to spend. Stores know this, and what they do is they'll usually put bottles, and there's the term top shelf, right? Bottom shelf, really cheap. Middle shelf, somewhere in the middle. Top shelf, really expensive. And they basically use the top shelf and the bottom shelf as a way to guide you to what they would like you to spend. They'll say, top shelf bottle is $100, bottom shelf bottle is $10. You go to the store and you basically go, okay, $10 is the lower bound, $100 is the upper bound. I'm going to immediately anchor myself at that price, and I'm going to say it's fine to spend between $20 and $40 on a bottle of wine, $50 to $60 if you're a little fancier than me. And they've done experiments with this where they just
spoiler alert, I'm less fancy than you.
10 bottle. My wife's favorite bottle of wine is like a $10 one made locally in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Sale because it's made locally in Wisconsin. That's great. And then there have been studies like box versus bottle. That's just pretentious stuff, and it doesn't really matter. And you could probably even argue that non-cork technology is better for wine. Subject for another show. But anyway, the point being, and they've done experiments with this where they just give people random numbers. They ask you to write down your social security number, and that just giving you that number ahead of time will convince you how much you should spend on something because your brain doesn't know. And so you have 56 in your mind. And someone says, will you spend $57? And you say, well, 56 is in my brain. That sounds right. Our brains aren't good. And the reason this is important is anytime there is the status quo, people get offended if there is a change to the status quo because they have anchored themselves at the status quo. They don't look at it holistically as to say the situation in the NBA that the best athletes like Anthony Davis, he's the best player in the league, right? Top 5, I'd argue. And let's see.
The way I would put it, Dre, is if I were going to assign anyone to a Supermax deal right now, considering his age and production and everything, it's probably Anthony Davis, right? A lot of the other best players are older than him.
I'll give you a quiz. Which players would you assign to an Ultramax right now without losing any sleep at night? I'll put it to you that. Because like for instance,
it's probably like 10, 8 players. I don't know.
James, you don't sleep, right? LeBron James, you sign him a Supermax, and you are awake at night. Kevin Durant, he's already 30. Man, that's nuts.
Curry is as well, and I would also give him a Supermax, but it's pretty much Giannis and AD, right? Those are the two most valuable players right now.
I'd give Jokic. And that
he's really young, huh?
He's only 23, man. Remarkable. Okay, but this idea of you're saying I love that point. He's a player you would without question. Rudy Gobert too is also really young.
Yes,
assign Supermax too without question. Him saying I want to do this and it not being allowed in most fields that is not the norm at all, and it's just the norm in basketball so the way basketball started, right, is it started with the draft. It started with the draft and no free agency, meaning once a team drafted you, the only way you could leave the team was if the team let you go. And I'm gonna tie this into our kind of bigger subject to the former greats. This hurt my heart a lot, Brian, because there were some former greats that have been talking about AD and KD, and one was Kareem. I apologize, I didn't include the link, but Kareem was talking about how he didn't think AD handled this correctly. And he said, well, back in my day, I approached the owner and it was private and I had a good relationship with the owner. I don't think AD did it right. And it broke my heart, Brian, to hear Kareem do this. And we noticed this before with UCLA, because with UCLA, with the Ball family and all the off-court antics there, he came out against the Ball family. And you even said you knew people that went to UCLA around the same time, and boosters and players getting paid money and all this off the court nonsense. That's part of college culture. It has been for a long time. It's
the same time as Kareem, not Lonzo Ball.
Not Lonzo, yes. Yeah. This culture of weird off the court antics, and there was a movie in the 90s starring Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway
Blue Chips.
Came out that was talking all about this.
Nick Nolte was their coach, Dre. I'm sure he's a great basketball coach.
Probably. Yeah, I've seen that movie. I didn't really like it, but I think I was too young. I think I saw it when I was in the Space Jam era. I was like, I want to see an enlightening story.
Yeah, it came out right about the same time as Space Jam.
And I was like, what is this garbage, ruining thing? I'm like, He Got Game is a similar.
Dre, I have to confess something to you. I have seen He Got Game, but I've never seen Space Jam. It was 17 when I came out. I was like a high school senior. I'm like, I don't want to see this kid's movie, so I just never saw it.
If I can tie it into our last subject, I'll try and bring it up. But a part of Space Jam that I love in an interesting way is it shows off the egotism of Michael Jordan and what an asshole he is. We might get there later.
Oh, is that what he has to overcome to win? He needs to do a team game?
No, we'll talk about it
okay.
Maybe. But anyway, Kareem has come out against Anthony Davis and against UCLA, and I think it feels very Stockholm syndrome, where the NBA and the NCAA are such a big part of his legacy and livelihood that if he denounces them, he recognizes that it hurts something that is integral to his identity. Because it really hurt me to see him take the side of the NBA over, the player. And interestingly enough, he was in the same boat. He was in a market he didn't like and said, I want to leave. He did the same thing. So him even coming out and saying, well, he handled it the wrong way. I did it differently. As many have noted, your era was freaking different, Kareem. There was no restricted free agency, which means there was no point where you could say, trade me or I'm gone in free agency. That did not exist in Kareem's era. If the Milwaukee Bucks had wanted to keep Kareem under contract forever, they could have. One of Kareem's teammates, Oscar Robertson, fought really, really hard to basically stop that, which, Oscar Robertson's one of the best ever. Additionally, he existed before the social media era, which is, at this point in history, if Kareem, a player of Kareem's stature, was on a team like the Bucks that had won a title or two, and they demanded a trade, do you think it would stay silent? It might have been those eras, but no way in hell it would this era, even if he tried to keep it under wraps. So it really hurt my feelings to see. No, that sounds way too personal. It was upsetting to me to see Kareem say that, because it made me think he forgot his own career. And there were another couple. The fun one to you, Brian, was Rick Barry, because Rick Barry is like, why would Kevin Durant want to leave the Warriors? There's such a great thing going on here. And I was like, you left a team that made the finals. By the way, when you came back later, you won a finals. So you left a multi-title worthy team to go play in the ABA for more money back in the day.
Yeah, he didn't just jump teams, Dre. He jumped leagues.
And it was such a big deal when he did it that he actually had to sit out a season for a lawsuit before he was allowed to play in the ABA. He ditched the NBA for more money in the ABA. And by the way, good on you, Rick Barry. You helped the ABA, you helped the NBA. You're a fantastic player, and I am fully behind your decision to do that. So I am baffled now where you're like, why would Kevin Durant want to leave an amazing squad like this? And, this is weird to me, Brian, from the reporting. And to be fair, we've fallen for this before, thanks to like Woj bombs. If Kevin Durant and AD end up in New York together, and DeAndre Jordan stays,
ooh,
New York could be good for a couple years.
That would be the best front court of all time, easily, I think. I don't know, maybe Parrish, McHale, and who was their third? Someone really good. Larry Bird! Oh, yeah, Larry Bird.
Okay. I mean, and it was funny. I saw Bill Simmons, fuck that guy too, because he was going up with a shut up and play AD. But he was saying, like, why would AD, it was AD. He's like, why would AD want to go to the Knicks? They're a poorly run franchise. And I'm like, the Knicks and Cleveland Cavaliers have shown you that if you get a couple stars, doesn't matter how badly run you've been in the NBA, you can still be relevant, right? The Knicks, their issue with Tyson Chandler and Jason Kidd wasn't that it wasn't that they were like poorly run and that's why that squad didn't compete. It was they were too old, right? Tyson Chandler and Jason Kidd were a little past their prime to be good enough to win them a title, but they won 54 games and went to the second or third round of the playoffs. So it doesn't matter how bad of an owner James Dolan is. It doesn't matter how poorly run the front office has been for the last couple of years for the Knicks. If they get KD and AD, and I love that, right? KD, AD, it sounds like there's something there. The Ds. It sounds, that team will be good, and that could be interesting.
Well, let me ask you a question about Jason Kidd and Tyson Chandler, Drake, because I forgot already. It's been like 10 years. Did they win a title together on the Mavericks before or after they went to the Knicks? I thought it might have been after, but I could be wrong there.
It was the Mavericks were before.
Okay, so the Mavericks, like, we're done. We're trading these old guys to the Knicks. Okay, that fits.
I don't know why Jason Kidd left the Mavericks. I would like to look into that because I believe he got a commensurate deal offer with the Mavericks. We've seen in the past, like with Steve Nash. Steve Nash came in and was like, just match my offer to the Suns and I'll stay. And they said no. And they went to the Suns and Steve Nashed it up. And, with Tyson Chandler, they didn't think his knees were going to last, and so they let him walk. Jason Kidd's the only player where they like offered him the same amount of money and he left, and I don't know why. But
yeah, both of them had several Hall of Fame caliber seasons after that, and of course we know Tyson Chandler is still playing all these years later and still playing very, very well.
He defies logic. And then the last one, Arturo Galletti posted about this, but was about Shaquille O'Neal saying he's like, if I was AD, I would stay in New Orleans, and he was like, you mean like you did, Shaq, staying with the Orlando Magic instead of hopping ship to LA? And Shaquille O'Neal is a great example to me of what we're talking about here, which is a player making decisions for reasons that might be different than the casual fan might think. And this always bugs me. Like in computer science, there's a term called satisficing. There's optimizing, right? You get the ideal solution, and there's satisficing, which is good enough. And the reason satisficing can get important is when you have constraints. And an example in the real world, right, is you want to go on a vacation. You want the most enjoyable vacation possible. You want the most affordable vacation possible, right? An affordable technical vacation might be like you might get a staycation with a Groupon at like the local Holiday Inn 2 blocks from your house. Not very enjoyable. A very enjoyable vacation, right, might be that you go to like Hawaii for 2 weeks and stay on an exclusive 5-star resort. Not affordable. You find some middle ground between the two that is enjoyable enough that you are willing to do the vacation and affordable enough that you're willing to do the vacation. Real world problems like that happen in the NBA, right? I want to go to a team that's in a big market like LA or New York or Chicago. I want to go to a team that's a contender. There might not be an open spot that fits that. So I pick a team, and this is what Shaquille O'Neal did back in the day when he went to the Lakers. They weren't a contender when he went to them. And he left a contender. The Orlando Magic had made the finals 2 years prior. They had him and Penny Hardaway. They looked amazing. They were in a fantastic spot to make multiple finals, especially if you thought Michael Jordan was retiring, because he went to the Lakers in '99. So if you're like, it's our time, right? The best player in the East is about to retire. I've got a fantastic teammate. I'm amazing. I'm in my prime. The Magic offered the same amount of money as the Lakers, and he still chose the Lakers for other reasons, right? He wanted to do acting. He had a rap career. He wanted to play in a big market. There were lots of reasons that Shaq decided he wanted LA over Orlando, and obviously he lucked into title success coming very quickly with Phil Jackson, Kobe Bryant actually advancing, and a lot of good role players. But he made a conscientious decision to basically leave winning on the table. Kevin Durant might be leaving the best dynasty in NBA history, right? This team could be the LeBron, not 6, not 7, not 8 team. But he might go, I've got my rings. And I'm going to get my money no matter where I go. So I want other things for myself. And there is no reason against that. So it is really surprising to see Rick Barry, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar all talking against him. And there is a very obvious facet to that, and I want to get this last part in, Brian, which is the narrative of loyalty in the NBA. You should always ask yourself, who is that benefiting? And it's, of course, the teams and the owners. And why are so many players willing to spout the same line? A lot of these players are still connected to the NBA either directly or indirectly. Shaquille O'Neal's a sideline commentator. Kareem has wanted, he'll probably never get it, but has wanted a front office coaching job and has had jobs in the front office with the Lakers. I don't quite know Rick Barry's connection with the Warriors, but of course it's still that. So anytime you see this, it's a little disheartening, but I also say I don't believe it.
Yeah, and when you were at the beginning of this topic, I felt like you were really going into some Kahneman and Tversky thinking fast and slow kind of stuff, right? Cognitive biases. And I think that's a good way to put it for these former players. And what I mean by that is like the conscious versus subconscious thoughts. So consciously, they're trying to be fair and everything and say, yeah, this is how you respect the league and all that, because like you're just saying, they all depend on their livelihood for it. But then I think subconsciously they all still wanted to be individuals and wanted to do their own thing and make the most money for themselves and improve their own situations, just like Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant are. So I think that's a big part of it is these legendary players just aren't seeing themselves clearly, because they're human and because of how the human brain works.
It is a very, we started the show saying fuck that guy to Brian Oringer, where his response to his own tweet did not line up, right? He was saying, I didn't say I could beat WNBA players. I was saying a really talented high school, and who even knows in that case. But you read the original, it's like, that's not what you said. There are two ways to view it. You're lying, or you might be misremembering or misthinking. A lot of athletes,
or he's lying to himself.
Lying to himself is a great way to phrase it, because I do think that happens a lot with former athletes. Charles Barkley, I'll give a shout out to Charles Barkley. I actually liked it here. He asked why Kevin Garnett's jersey isn't retired in Minnesota. I think it actually does fall under the same Chyna issue, which is Kevin Garnett's still around, and Kevin Garnett apparently, from what I hear, and this was just in the cursory 2 minutes of research after seeing Charles Barkley say, hey, Kevin Garnett, why isn't your jersey retired? This was at the All-Star Game festivities. He said it on camera, and Kevin Garnett's like, I don't know. And people have said that Kevin Garnett has basically said behind the scenes he has no intention of showing up to a jersey retirement ceremony. So I could see the Wolves going, we don't want to retire his jersey when he doesn't want to show up for the jersey retirement.
I don't know fully what's going on there, but it sounds like things have turned quickly, because at the end of his playing career, didn't he own a piece of the Timberwolves and he was trying to get into the ownership?
Remember Michael Jordan with the Wizards. When Michael Jordan still had a chance of playing, the Wizards were nice and cordial to him. And then he came back and played, sold his ownership stake when he was done playing. He was like, hey, do you want me back? And they're like, no, get out of here. And buy his way back into the league. So it could be the same. Who knows what happened with Kevin Garnett there.
Part of it might have been Flip Saunders, too. I think he was close with Flip Saunders, and he died from cancer, of course. So I don't know. I'm speculating. Let's move on.
But anyway, but just saying, I didn't bring Charles Barkley up as one of my examples in those three, Brian. But Charles Barkley is a player who routinely will say stuff and you go, did you not watch your own career?
He's just a troll. I think he does it on purpose.
And then a player that I always get into is I hate seeing Kobe Bryant above Shaquille O'Neal on any top 10 list because I go, how the hell do you have Kobe over Shaquille O'Neal? They played together in their best era. Shaquille O'Neal was obviously the best, the three-time Finals MVP player. So I'll be baffled and go like, how the hell are you putting Kobe over Shaq? You had, in theory, this is me getting the nerd getting to say, didn't you watch the games or watch the box scores? Like, how the hell do you have Kobe over Shaq? You have to look at Shaq's numbers and games to look at Kobe, and obviously he was the better player. So anyway, players forget, and I think you lying to themselves. Tertiary shout out that's kind of related. This was Seth Burns. Or Seth Byrne, right?
Yep.
You don't like Magic the Gathering days. Is it Byrne or Burns? I want to get
Seth Byrne, no S. He's big in the gambling scene.
Okay, so Seth Byrne, great follow on Twitter if you don't. As you said, you know him from Magic, so it's always funny when people overlap on various topics. But I was tweeting about analytics and saying that a lot of analytics that I bash routinely on the show, and I use the phrase bash routinely on the show, routinely, but they would fail an intro to college course on statistics for various things. The regression analysis behind all of the PM metrics you see, this is BPM, PIPM, all the other ones, I hate them all, that fails out of the gate. Intro, day one regression analysis, it fails. I'm sorry. They are the incorrect way to do regression analysis. There are statistics, on-off statistics, that wouldn't pass any significance test, which means you're done. And again, that's very rudimentary intro. I had a 300 level statistics class that I just had to take to pass my undergraduate degree. I took advanced statistics, as in grad school. So that's is what it is. But there's stuff like that where they wouldn't pass a significance test, which means you don't say anything, on-off statistics. And these things fail very quickly, and I see people use them, and it's painful. But I go, you are failing day one topics of this subject you're trying to use. And I talked back and forth a little with Seth Byrne about it, and he said they are applying what they think they've learned. And I was mind blown. Again, falls under this Dunning-Kruger area where it's going. They don't realize how badly they've learned. They don't realize that they've mislearned a subject and then think they're using it correctly. And that sums up so much of the advanced analytics. And again, the same thing with players, to just tie it back to the players. It's like we have so many players that don't realize, they don't remember their history correctly. They don't know the lessons. And it's cognitive dissonance and cognitive fallacies are a fun part of this.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, in terms of the split, with the mainstream, we always talk about, just because the academics, like you are killing them on this stuff over and over again, why should they care? Because mainstream media agrees with them. So they're just going to go with who agrees with them and who makes it better for their career. It makes sense, right?
Yeah, so it's funny because from a two-part standpoint, we're talking cognitive fallacies where they're doing things incorrectly, and then you're talking a very economics-based point, which is respond to incentives. And yeah, why should you care what some niche blogger who can't pay you, who can't give you a job, who wouldn't give you a job because you don't do the analysis, right? Can't do any of that. Why should you care what they say when a site that will give you money or a platform will care what you say? Let's see. I wanted to kind of relate so if you've got any of the Jay Gunter, Brett, or any other comments, Brian, I did read them over before the show, but I didn't really collect them at all. But we were talking about the draft, and I had an existential crisis thinking about the draft after that piece. And I think you and I have talked this a lot about how the NBA works. It's a star-driven league, and there are times where a team is tanking, but if we're honest about their tanking, they're not losing that many more games than they normally would be, right? The Knicks are a 10-win team right now. If we looked at that roster and had a decent coach and put together a better squad, they might be a 20-win team, right? They're not a good team, and you do hit this point of no return with teams where they're so good, people are going to show up no matter what, right? If you get a 55-win NBA team, you're going to be selling out your arena. If you get to 60, that's great. If you get to 65, that's great. If you get to 70, that's great. We even run into that annoying part, right? If you're a contender at 60 wins, 60 to 70 might cost you millions of dollars to get another star. and you might marginally improve your chances of winning.
Probably going to be way into the luxury cap at that point too.
You're going to be into the luxury cap, and your fans are going to show up regardless, and it could just be luck of the draw and health of your squad in the playoffs. So it's like it might not even be worth it. Same thing. If you have a team that's a 25-win team, the loyal fans are going to show up, or the people that want to show up to see, Steph Curry come through town, they'll show up. But it's not as if being a 25-win team versus a 15-win team is that great. The NBA is already lopsided, and we just have to look at the distribution of it. As soon as only one NBA team, as soon as one NBA team gets 2 top 10 players on it, it is impossible to really even evenly arrange the rest of the NBA. And to do that would take a lot of weird math, because you've made this point, Brian, about like Eric Gordon. There are players that offset stars. So I could have Giannis on a team, and I go, to be really fair, to have Giannis on that squad, that team is going to need to pick up Jonathan Simmons and play him as a starter. That's the only way it's fair. And the Bucks might look at you and go, no, we're not going to do that. So as soon as a team has a star, the league's already unbalanced, actually, because I think we've argued like the top 10 to 15 players really dictate if you have a shot at a title. As soon as a team has 2, it's game over, which means the league is going to be unbalanced. And that means that when I was talking about this with Anthony Davis in the draft and why the draft is meaningless, I said the whole reason we have the draft is this lie that owners need a fair league, an even league. They need, bad teams need a chance to compete. And what we've said is, well, it's always going to be unfair, and the fans are okay with it. I think as long as the worst team in the NBA has a 1 in 20 shot of beating the best team in the NBA, somewhere around that, as long as any team has always got a shot to win it, and then usually, right, I think it's about 1 in 5, right, as long as any team in the playoffs with some good bounces, right, health or whatever, has a shot at beating the top team, as long as that exists, and that has existed throughout NBA history, you're fine. The only real case I could see the NBA falling is this actual case that people are saying, oh my God, team's so bad the league falls apart. But we've seen, even with these teams that are intentionally trying to lose, they can still beat the best teams in the NBA, right? The Knicks, I don't know if they beat them. I think they beat them. They beat the Bucks, right? They beat the Bucks this year in overtime. The worst team out East can beat the best team out East if all the situations bounce right. We've had that forever, and fans are okay with it. So when I was talking about like fixing the draft, the existential crisis I had is that it doesn't actually matter. And I made a political point to you about this, Brian, that I don't want to get into. And this should really frighten you if you're not a fan of politics, but if you've been following politics. So a big divisive point in this country right now has been Donald Trump's wall. And he's declared a national emergency, which by the own definition he used, declaring it is not a national emergency, because he said, I could do this, but it'd take longer. I don't want to wait. Anyway, so he's declared a national emergency to build a border wall to keep brown people out. And because there's a thing called an airplane, it's not even going to do that. And, everybody agrees it's a stupid idea. That's fine. The problem, and I heard Jack O'Brien on the the Daily Zeitgeist podcast bring up, he goes, the annoying part is if he builds the wall, it's not going to hurt most people. It's not like taking away Obamacare. It's not like various other policies like the tax thing where there is a tangible impact to your quality of life. If Donald Trump builds the wall, to most people, they're not going to notice or care. And it might be government misspending, but the government has misspent money on many things. If you look at how much money we spend on various military industrial complex things, it could be a drop in the bucket compared to that. So if Trump builds the wall, it might not have the political clout we might be hoping for, because most people are going to shrug and go, oh, I didn't even notice. And the draft is the same way, because from a ethical standpoint and moralistic standpoint, you've seen us rally for players' rights. It's bullshit. But I think draft or no draft, the NBA is going to look very similar because of all of these problems we've brought up. Even if you remove the draft, you're going to have really crappy, poorly run teams. Part of the reason the draft doesn't fix things is because Luka Doncic goes fourth and falls, and a team drafts Trae Young in front of him and trades Trae Young for Luka Doncic. It's like, that is why the NBA is still lopsided. It's because they're poorly run teams, and the well-run teams are going to run laps. They're going to run light years around the poorly run teams, Brian, and removing the draft won't fix that. So I had kind of like an existential thing, because I was like, we need to get rid of the draft. And I thought about it. I was like, the funny thing is, even if we get rid of the draft, It's not going to fix the NBA the way people are hoping it would fix the NBA.
Yeah, and that's why I loved your article, is that it seems so obvious now that we're talking about it, but I had never quite thought about it that way before. And what I mean is the draft is actually making teams worse because of tanking, right? Like if the draft were just gone, these worse tanking teams might actually be trying to win games. Amazing, So I think that's addressed, in the context of people wanting to fix the draft. They say, let's try to find a way to make teams not tank. But come on, just getting rid of the draft would be the real way to do it.
All right. Well, that's a ton. I'll let you as the producer decide, Brian. We can end with the fuck Michael Jordan segment, or we can call it a show. We've gone a little over an hour.
I'm good. But I'd be interested to hear if you want to, get into a little bit on Michael Jordan.
Well, let's start. What bugged me is, so right now, two former Seattle Supersonics, were they both Supersonics at the same time? James Harden and Russell Westbrook, I forget. I think
James Harden was never on the Supersonics.
Was he drafted by the Sonics? Was he their last draft?
No, I think he was drafted by Oklahoma City.
Okay, so it wasn't even. Okay, yeah. So, but two former Thunder players on one of the best squads, should have been one of the best squads ever, that for whatever reason did not happen.
Ibaka was really, really good back then too, let's remember.
Oh yeah. Ibaka, Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, amazing core. Could have had Tyson Chandler too. That would have been something. Okay, so oops. Oh yeah, I see what's happening. Sorry. Autoplay ads, even though they say they're muted. Okay, so anyway, what happened is Russell Westbrook's in the midst of his third season averaging a triple-double. Unfortunately, his scoring is so inefficient, I don't know if I can count it, but third season averaging a triple-double. James Harden is on one of the most prolific scoring streaks ever, right? He's got multiple. I don't remember if he's surpassed Michael Jordan in any way, but he's having one of the greatest scoring seasons ever, shooting some of the most threes ever. And I forget what number he hit before the All-Star break, Brian, but it was a certain number of 30-point games in a row. And someone asked,
it was a lot.
Someone asked Michael Jordan, they said, hey, what's harder? Is it harder to score 30 points in a game? Is it harder to score 30 points, 30 games in a row, or get 10 triple-doubles in a row? And Michael Jordan said it's harder to get 6 rings. And fuck Michael Jordan for this comment, and he's hitting Kobe territory for me. And by that, what I mean is, Michael Jordan, I stole one of your expressions there, Brian. You saying by that what I mean is, if you start saying candidly to stuff, we'll have each other's.
Nothing I do is candid.
All right. Okay. But anyway, by that what I mean is, Michael Jordan, first off, what pissed me off from like a teacher's perspective is he didn't answer the damn question, because the person was very clearly asking what individual achievement is harder. Individual player box score achievement. So Michael Jordan didn't even answer with an individual box score achievement. This is his narcissism, and he made it about him, right? And he easily could have said, easy cop-out answer, parent answer, right? I love both my kids equally. Oh my God, those players are just both doing such amazing things. I'm impressed by their play. If he had wanted to make it about himself, he could have said something like, as someone who's scored 30 points, as someone who has the record for most 30-point games scored right behind Wilt Chamberlain, I can say, right, I can easily say, okay, yeah. And by the way, I guess it's the interesting part. This might be part of the reason Michael Jordan did it. It gets to my point. James Harden is now second all-time behind Wilt Chamberlain, tied with Wilt Chamberlain. That's how amazing Wilt Chamberlain is, for the most consecutive 30-point games. So Michael Jordan is now not top 3 on any of the most consecutive X-point games. LeBron James surpassed Michael Jordan in most consecutive 10-point games recently last year, and he's still going. James Harden has passed him on the most 30-point games, and of course Wilt Chamberlain owns all the others. So he could have said, as someone who's scored 30 points a game and more things, I can say this. Or, I have mad respect for triple doubles because getting those rebounds for a guard is really
So that's the way to be a narcissist, but less of a dick, you're saying, and he still didn't do that.
He didn't answer the question, and he made it about himself, which is the first bullshit part. And the second bullshit part, and this is one of the things I just have a general problem with Michael Jordan, is the mainstream media basically decided Michael Jordan is the greatest all time. And a big part of that is just timing. We were talking a lot about timing. We were talking like Chyna in the Attitude Era. Michael Jordan came about during the biggest growth period in the NBA, when it arguably hit the apex of its popularity. And part of the reason it's its apex of popularity, is that there has been so much more media and other things that people can do since then, that there was this period of time in the 90s where if you were a mainstream television thing like wrestling, like basketball, like football, right? Baseball too, professional sports, there wasn't other stuff people could watch. We've hit a point now, right, where there are 5 or 10 bingeable shows on various streaming services that we can all watch. So to have everybody's eyes on one thing or one person, LeBron James is easily a better player than Michael Jordan. He's just never going to match the popularity of Michael Jordan because we're not going to go back to that media market. That's that genie's out of the bottle. So, but the mainstream media decided he was the greatest of all time. And as of his retirement, I could argue, the all-time points leader was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The all-time rings holder was Bill Russell, and Michael Jordan does have 6 Finals MVPs. The reason he has 6 Finals MVPs, and that's a record, is they didn't used to give out the Finals MVP. They named it after Bill Russell. And so what is happening to Michael Jordan, and this is kind of sad, this reminds me a lot of Pete Sampras, he kind of ended on top, and slowly all of his records and numbers are being eroded. LeBron James is blowing to hell all the stuff. He's going to pass Michael Jordan on the point scoring list this year. He's passed him in all the playoff stats, which used to be Michael Jordan's claim to fame. So Michael Jordan wants to still say, I'm the greatest, and he's trying to make it about him, and he's going to the 6 rings. And the reason this pissed me off in addition is that's a team thing. And a lot of Michael Jordan's success has so much to do with luck of the draw and right timing. The NBA shortened the three-point line when Michael Jordan's team was perfectly built for the three-point line. He was really lucky to be on a squad with Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant. He wanted to hop ship a few times, and he wasn't able to hop ship. You could argue Michael Jordan coming back to the Bulls was because Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant were doing fine without him. Remember, Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant both made the All-Star game. The Bulls won 54 games the next season without him. Scottie Pippen won the All-Star game MVP. I looked that up when I was looking up All-Star MVP winners, Brian. Horace Grant went to the Wizards, and they made it to the finals. You might argue Michael Jordan came back to the NBA because he was like, no, my team is doing well without me. This is bullshit. And we mentioned Space Jam earlier. There is a scene in Space Jam where he's playing minor league baseball and he's arguing that he couldn't play minor league baseball because people loved him too much and were always cheering him, so he couldn't get better at minor league baseball. And then in the movie, it's like, I have to come back and play basketball because the Looney Tunes have shown me I love for basketball. So he had a movie where he was inserted as, a prop, right? The Looney Tunes play basketball. And in that movie, he had to send out messages that were like, I'm a humble guy, I'm a great guy. Everybody loves me too much. I love basketball too much to quit it, right? This very self-aggrandizing stuff, and we've seen him do that in real life, right? He didn't get cut from his high school basketball team, but he's persisted that narrative. When he made it to the Hall of Fame, he was very anti-other people. So my kind of point is, one, I'm pissed off that this guy was granted the label of greatest all time. In the same era, like Magic Johnson made more finals than Michael Jordan, right? I think John Stockton for longevity. As we mentioned, a bunch of the record book stuff, Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem, their records in the record book weren't knocked off by Michael Jordan. So I'm to a degree pissed off that he was granted the greatest all time. And then just watching him off the court after the fact, I'm like, this guy is an asshole. And I'm kind of sick of, it's like, it was the same thing with Kobe during Kobe's retirement stint when he was, going to all the airs. I was like, this guy has gotten all of the accolades, all of the praise, all of the thanks, and he's an asshole. And I'm kind of he certainly, this isn't the first time, right? He plays one-on-one against basketball players on his team. He smacked one of his players on the head earlier this year. It's God. Not, this is his first instance, but this was kind of a weird straw that broke the camel's back. And it's annoying because it could be pedantic. It could be that it broke my professor brain where I was like, you didn't answer in the form of a question. This is Jeopardy. What are you doing? But I'm like, fuck this. I'm like, no, I'm done, Michael Jordan. You're overrated. At this point, you're overrated to me because you're one of the greatest. You're Mount Rushmore. But I am sick, especially with the fact that you have to insert yourself over better players. I'm sick of that. And so this can be known as the breaking point for Dre and Michael Jordan on the show.
Yeah, well said. I'm thinking back to when we were talking, in the last segment about the other legendary players, right? Shaq and Rick Barry and whatnot. And I was basically saying, well, do they see themselves, as kind of a cog in the machine and they have to subconsciously, defend the system still? Well, maybe Michael Jordan doesn't see himself like that. Like, he's a team owner, right? Like, he owns 90% of the Hornets or whatever. Maybe he still sees himself as a competitor against James Harden and whoever the other player was. And so maybe he's just like, fuck that guy, I'm going to kick his ass. Like, he still is in that player mindset all these days, all these years later. So, yeah, that's probably what's going on there.
So we've talked to, I'll let this be the cap and then we can end the show. We've talked with Art Rondeau about like player motivation, and it can get interesting. Where Art's, I don't remember if he's done this on the show or just off topic to me, where he's talked like, they're great athletes or great performers. I think he mentioned Madonna. There was a Madonna show where her dad was in the audience. She did a shout, and it's like she's still, after all these years, being revered as one of the greatest pop stars ever, if not the greatest pop star ever, like still wants her parents' approval. And one player I saw was Tom Brady. I saw a quote from Tom Brady before the Super Bowl where he's like, I don't want people to cheer me. He's like, I want people to hate me because, I can prove them wrong. And I was like, that's messed up. I'm like, your motivation for playing comes from an external drive to prove people wrong. And I would argue Michael Jordan was the same way. The story Michael Jordan tells himself is I'm the underdog and people are against me. And that drive and motivation can get weird, especially when it stops being true and it's cognitive dissonance. You are either forced to face the reality or, keep lying to yourself, which is really weird. And it's one reason, by the way, that I'm happy that my theory that LeBron James wants to win the all-time scoring title in Los Angeles, I'm happy if he has that, because keeping the drive to play at the top level is really, really difficult. But it pains me to watch people basically have the negative slant, because it's like, oh, you're always going to be messed up. Like you are literally, you were handed the keys to the basketball kingdom, Michael Jordan, and you still can't like share it with other people, which is messed up to me. So, like I said, I hope I hope LeBron James, I hope his motivations aren't that when he retires, he's not a whacked out guy like Michael Jordan.
Yeah, I hate to bring in politics at the very end here, so I'll try to be very brief. But, I mean, this is what's going on in our political system now, right? It's this, and Tom Brady, the reason I thought of this is because Tom Brady is a right-wing Trumpist, And it's this idea of hierarchies and that life and society is a zero-sum game. And the only way, for me to get ahead and to get to the top of this hierarchy, which is what you're supposed to do in this worldview, is to take it from other people and to push them down. So that's the mindset, right? It's me against the world, and I have to win. And, not just me, there's my family and my friends, whatever. They're like my tools, basically. That's the mindset. And, of course, we believe it's the opposite. You need all of society working together.
And the greatest squads, interestingly enough, the Patriots, the Spurs, it took a team of many people working together well to achieve it and keep it going. So that's what we prefer, sustained greatness with everybody working together. So Brian Foster, 2020. All right. Do you have a couple shout outs, Brian? I'll let you get those and that'll be our show. I'll say this in terms of we had some discussion about the draft. I realized we didn't get as much in the comment section, Brian, and then some discussions about other things. I'll just say good news. We are doing data auditing stuff and we'll have more on that in the upcoming weeks. Yell at us if you don't hear about it.
Yeah, both of my shout-outs are to Arturo, who we already have mentioned in the show, but at American Numbers on Twitter. He had some really good stuff the last few days that we just didn't have time to talk about on the show, so it'll be a shout-out instead. At the All-Star break, 2 days ago, he did run charts month by month for, I'm not sure if he did every team in the NBA, but he did almost all of them. And he did use, his own stat, PM per 48, but it's not too far away from wins produced.
We'll give it. Well, I mean, so that is like a point margin one, and then what it the way it adjusts position. But the interesting thing is, we've talked a little bit about the wins produced formula, and I've said it's a recipe, and there are various, you could substitute sugar with honey, right? That's a common one. I think applesauce is used for something a lot in baking, right? You sub out something for applesauce. I can't remember. Bakers, chime in if you know. He has his own flavor, and even if I disagree with it, I'm like, you have followed the criteria I've given, which is to say, if you are going to do this methodology for grading players, you have to explain this part, and he does it, whereas other metrics do not. So we love it. And then he's had some great individual player ones like week to week. Keep an eye on American Numbers on Twitter. I think I was talking to him a bit about it, and he might start posting some of it too. So keep an eye on that because it looks fantastic, and it also has some of the stuff I like, which is just, like week to week stuff, how players are doing. You can compare like Donovan Mitchell or one of the arguments we've been having, right, Brian, is Luka Doncic versus Ayton. Because I'm pretty sure, especially with the position adjustment, Ayton is lost to Doncic. He's already Rookie of the Year. Doncic.
So let's go to it, Dre. We've got Dallas right here on Arturo's run chart, and he was coming up, but now he's going down again. So we'll have to see how he goes. But anyway, check out these great run charts if you want to see how players are doing lately. And I had one more that this is another really big topic that we're going to probably get into in the coming months as this story develops, but this keeps coming up. Maybe James Dolan might be willing to sell the Knicks, and Nate Jones, another great NBA poster, was asking about this, why it's difficult to sell the Knicks because of how big of a conglomerate they are and why they are the number one most valuable franchise. They have the MSG building and the Rangers and the broadcast network as well. And of course, Arturo replied to that. It's all about the RDA tax exemption. And that's about salary deprecation, right, which is some bogus rule that's baked into the NBA. And Arturo's theory is that the only reason why Dolan's trying to sell the team, basically, is that this is a way to just kind of skirt the system and make more money. I'm oversimplifying, but
basically about every 15 years, you'll notice this in NBA franchises. You have to change ownerships to apply for certain tax things. Arturo's talked about this for years.
Yep.
And so that's another. So it's as an example, like another similar example is like Kroenke with the Nuggets also owned the Avalanche and the Rams, and I think like to own the Rams required losing one. And so interestingly enough, his son got the Nuggets. So it's like it's like you go interest. It's like you're like I'm selling the team to my friend Dolan James. So it's
And he did link to his 2011 article on Wages and Wins where he wrote extensively about this. And I kind of remember this now when it came out, looking back on it. But anyway, it's a rigged system. To get back to politics, the NBA, it's a rigged system.
In Wages of Wins and Boxscore Geeks, Arturo's written some of our most popular pieces. I know this will shock you, Brian. The really long, drawn-out articles on tax exemptions never seem to quite find an audience. I don't know why. Who knows? All right. Anyway, well, that's been our show. If you've been us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live every week, twitch.tv/nerd numbers, usually around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Twitch. You can catch the audio versions of the show, iTunes and Stitcher. Subscribe, upvote, helps us out. And if you want to catch live recaps so you can see the stuff Brian puts in the video, channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. I've been your host, Ray Alvarez, Nerd Numbers, if you haven't heard that enough already, on Twitter. And then co-host Brian Foster, you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Did I say that right? Hope I did. If not, it's fine. Anyway, here's looking forward to the NBA, and we'll see if we ever see Anthony Davis in a Pelicans uniform again.